everyone, I'm joined here today with Thomas DuBois. He has a business that helps people recover from their knee injuries and other joint injuries. I seeked out his help because I was having a lot of issues with my knee. A lot of swelling. It was ongoing for several years, actually, for like 4 years now. And I noticed some stretching videos he did online. I thought maybe he could help me. And as you'll learn later on, he definitely did help me a lot. So, Tom, can you give us an introduction?
Sure. So my name is Thomas DuBois. I grew up in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley region. I became licensed as a massage therapist in 2006 after doing my first year of college as an exchange student in India. Got interested in massage while I was over there and received a lot of massage treatments. So when I got back to the US, I enrolled in massage therapy school and graduated from that program in 2006. Spent the first few years of my massage therapy practice working in very busy chiropractic and physical therapy offices, and also got the opportunity to teach at the Hudson Valley School of Massage Therapy in West Park, New York, at that time. I then went on to specialize in movement. So the majority of my clients throughout most of my years as a massage therapist would stay completely clothed, and I would help them through stretches and exercises to help with injuries, chronic pain, and improving athletic performance. So by 2008, I was specializing in a technique called active isolated stretching and strengthening, which is also what my current main focus. I've been focusing on that since 2008 at this point. I learned from the founder of the technique, Aaron Mattis in Florida, and even got the opportunity to work in his clinic for a while. So I got to know his protocols really well. And after getting to know those protocols really well, he even gave me permission to teach the work as continuing education for other massage therapists and fitness professionals. So I've taught active isolated stretching to other fitness and wellness professionals all over the U.S. And in Central America at this point. Currently, I reside in Samara, Costa Rica. I am the kinesiology instructor and orthopedic assessment instructor for the Costa Rica School of Massage Therapy. I see clients here, and I also run an online business where I teach people how to do the proper stretches and exercises for injuries, chronic pain, and helping athletic performance.
Great. And you're also plant-based as well, right?
I am, yeah. I've been plant based since 2004. I first went vegetarian when I was an exchange student in India because my host family were they were Hindu vegetarians. So I adopted that while I was there, and I noticed a lot of immediate health benefits. I was 17 when I moved to India, and just immediately noticed myself feeling better, having more energy. Noticed since I was a 17-year-old kid, I had all kinds of acne on my face, and that started clearing up. So I was vegetarian for that entire year in India. And then shortly after returning to the US, I learned about the benefits of being completely vegan, completely plant-based. And I very quickly made that change, and I've been that way ever since. And, I've never really looked back. I've noticed nothing but improvements in my health, my energy level. And also, as someone who cares about the environment, it seems to be the best possible option for that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been fully, 100% plant-based since 2016, but I went plant-based in 2012. So I was probably more like a vegetarian at that point. Yeah,
Sure.
I never look back. I love this lifestyle. So my first question, so I wanted to focus on the joints now. What is the number
Sure.
one cause of painful joints and even swollen joints?
Sure. So, I mean, joint pain tends to be a very common thing in our modern society and even throughout history. Joints tend to be the part of our bodies that uh, have the most stress on them just because it's where movement happens, and joints also have to, stabilize ourselves and actually support our body weight. So joints are a common area for pain. However, joints are built very well, and we should be able to, live most of our life without pain in our joints. The majority of joint pain that we have tends to come from muscle imbalances around our joints. Most of us spend, our days only doing probably about 10% of the motions available to us at any given joint. So parts of our joints get strong, but other parts of our joints, stay weak. Certain muscles that we use a lot around our joints get strong, and sometimes because of that they get tight and exert awkward pressure on joints. But also at the same time, muscles that we don't use around joints tend to get weak and not do their job so much. So when you have this combination of certain muscles doing their job, certain muscles being too tight, and certain muscles being too weak around joints, we wind up with awkward pressure inside the joints. The a joint is really two bones meeting in the body, or in some cases, a bone and cartilage meeting in the body. And in any case, our synovial joints, where most of our movement happens in our body, they're lined with this. Very smooth, soft cartilage called hyaline cartilage, and that's this smooth surface that allows for all of this, detailed movement to happen in our joints. But when we wind up with imbalance around our joints, that puts awkward pressure on that cartilage and causes things to wear out more quickly than it should. And then when that wears out, we wind up with, instead of those smooth articular surfaces meeting each other, now we have rough bone meeting each other, and that leads to inflammation. A lot of people can talk about how inflammation is the cause of joint pain, but in many cases, inflammation doesn't happen if the muscles around our joints are balanced out. Sure, I mean, some joint pain will be the result of injury, but injuries, when we have an injury, that should hurt for the time that we're injured, but eventually it should heal and we should feel better. But oftentimes when we injure ourselves, that causes certain muscles to tighten up and other muscles to sometimes really not do their job enough. Some muscles get tight in response to pain. Some muscles actually get weak in response to pain. And then when we don't address that muscle imbalance, that's what causes joint pain to linger on after an injury. So, whether we're talking about inflammation in the joint or previous injuries to the joint, the reason that we wind up having prolonged pain in the joint is due to muscle imbalances around the joint.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time I've seen an orthopedist or physical therapist, they've always said the same thing. Once my knee is stable, it'll get better. And that seems to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. That's, our joints, they need to be flexible so that they can move, but they also need to be stable, or they need to be strong so they can be stable. So, with all of our joints, we need all of the muscles around the joint to be working. And by working, what I mean is they need to, one, be flexible enough to allow movement, and two, they need to be strong enough to stabilize the joint throughout the demands that we put on it throughout our activities of daily living.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we talked a little bit about plant-based diets before, but how do you think it helps with joints? Because if you don't mind me interjecting, my doctor, he told me I should have been in excruciating pain the other year when I saw him. He looked at my x-rays. And he agreed that it was probably because of my plant-based diet that I wasn't. But yet I was still having swelling. But still, I wonder your thoughts on plant-based diets.
I think that plant-based diets are incredibly healthy when it comes to pain in the body, especially around joints. Same thing. Inflammation around joints. And when I talk about muscle imbalance, around joints, before, that's nothing. Most of us have muscle imbalances around our joints just because we don't know that they're imbalanced. So regardless of how much effort you put in, we're all going to have some muscle imbalance around our joints. But things like a plant-based diet are going to help to reduce the amount of inflammation that is caused by any irritation from that imbalance around the joint. A plant-based diet is a very low inflammation diet. Really, inflammation in the body tends to come from histamines. Our body produces histamines, which create inflammation, and that helps us to bring blood flow to areas, and it also helps us to fight off infection in the area if there's an open wound or something like that. But a lot of animal products cause our body to produce more histamine than it actually needs to produce. So people actually wind up having a stronger inflammation response than they actually should when they have a lot of animal products in their diet. Aside from just the low inflammation aspects of a plant-based diets also have the ability to encourage less inflammation. Plant-based diets tend to be rich in things like seeds and nuts and legumes, which tend to have a lot of alpha lipoic acid and gamma lipoic acid in them, which really help bring down inflammation in the body. Other things like foods rich in omega-3s, like a lot of vegetables, whole grains, flax seeds, things like that, that are also hemp seeds that are also regularly part of a plant-based diet, are all things that really help to bring down the inflammation levels in the body. And the lower inflammation, the less pain we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it worked for me. So.
Yeah.
Do you think most people can avoid joint replacements later on in life if they always do the proper stretching, balancing, and strength exercises?
I think that a lot of joint replacements can be avoided by taking the proper measures to create balance around your joints and balance between flexibility and strength. Now, I mean, there's nothing out there that is a sure 100% going to prevent joint replacements in your life. I mean, things do happen. Sometimes injuries happen that require us to have a joint replacement. But doing the right things for your joints and maintaining them in the right way can go a long way in preserving them throughout your lifetime. When people normally the most common causes for joint replacements are osteoarthritis, so the wearing out of that hyaline cartilage on the surfaces of our joints. If someone has a hip replacement, that's normally due to osteoarthritis in the hip. The articular surfaces of the part of the joint that meets each other, the cartilage that covers those articular surfaces has worn out, and then that's where the term bone on bone comes from. When people are candidates for hip replacements or knee replacements, normally the time that the doctor recommends that surgery is when they become bone on bone. And bone on bone just means that the cartilage on either side of that joint has worn away, normally due to a muscle imbalance allowing increased pressure in the joint. But once we get to the point where we are bone on bone, then that's normally when a hip replacement or a knee replacement or an ankle replacement or a shoulder replacement is recommended. But we don't have our hyaline cartilage, the cartilage on the end of our joints doesn't have to wear out. If our muscles are flexible and our muscles are strong enough to stabilize the joint, then that maintains the proper space in the joint, and there's less pressure within the joint. If there's less pressure within the joint, things wear out. Things do not wear out quite as fast. I personally believe that if we take proper care of our joints, then we should be able to live a full, long, and healthy life without ever needing a joint replacement. Like obviously, like I said, things do happen sometimes that are out of our control, but the majority of people should be able to live their entire life without ever needing a joint replacement if they take proper care of their joint.
Definitely.
Most people wind up with joint replacements because of muscle imbalances. They use some muscles around their joint too much and other muscles not enough. That's why some of these things happen to athletes at such a young age, because athletes train very hard. And I don't care what athletic activity you do, any athletic activity you do is going to have you using some aspects of a joint more than other aspects of the joint. Now, I mean, the proper answer to that is not to cease from doing your athletic activity. You should be able to do the things you love, but you also need to do the proper things, stretching, functional strength, and things like that in order to maintain balance around your joint. So you can't just do the athletic activity that you like to do, and you can't just train for the athletic activity you like to do. You need to do things like cross training and doing the proper maintenance, like strengthening, stretching, and functional movement exercises to really maintain the health of your joints while you're training so hard.
And I learned that the hard way because, as you know, and my audience knows, I became a runner probably about 6 years ago, and I never did any stretching or warm ups or anything. I just always went right to it, and I don't think that helped my knee.
Sure. I mean, you're probably better off for having run than not run.
Right.
But at the same time, your knee probably would have done a little better if you did know the right things to do at the time, and that's probably no fault of your own.
No.
Oftentimes we don't know what we don't know until somebody kind of points us in that direction. But yeah, running is a perfect example. Running is so much front to back motion. It utilizes, like, especially around our knee and our hips. It utilizes the muscles that flex and extend those joints so much, but it doesn't really utilize the muscles that stabilize them from an inner and from a medial and lateral perspective.
Right.
So those muscles just don't really do their job quite as well as the muscles in the front and back of the knee or the front and back of the hip, and then we wind up with imbalance around the joint. I've almost never seen a person who's a candidate for hip replacement surgery who's strong in their hip abductors. It seems to be one of the most common factors I see in hip replacement surgery is that people are weak in their hip abductors on the outside of their hip. That allows the femoral head to sink deeper in the joint and creates a lot of rubbing and friction in there, and eventually the joint wears out. But if we're able to keep that tissue strong, then it keeps the proper space in the joint, and these things don't really happen quite as much.
Yeah, that's why I'm so glad I met you, because I told you my adductor muscles were very weak when I started this program. I mean, they're so much better now. I mean, I've never had hip problems, but just to know that I could avoid it with those exercises, that's just awesome, because I really was weak when I was first trying those exercises. Amazing if if you stick with it long enough, it definitely can improve.
For sure.
So during my knee injury, it's been chronic swelling, and I never ever had a cortisone shot because I always heard about degrading the joint further, and I didn't want to go down that road. I had a doctor or two recommended saying it might control the swelling. I'm just wondering if you could share your thoughts on cortisone.
Sure. Cortisone is so what cortisone is cortisone is a steroid injection. It's a strong anti-inflammatory. So what cortisone does is it completely zaps away the inflammation in a joint or wherever we have pain. So cortisone in some cases can be when used sparingly and used conservatively, can in some cases be a tool to help people get out of pain enough for them to actually work with the area. But unfortunately, a lot of people rely on cortisone as a form of pain management or ongoing pain management. The problem with cortisone, even though there's many situations where it can be a good idea. The problem with cortisone is people use it too much, and that's why most doctors will only do like 3 cortisone shots in a year because the steroids in cortisone will actually they'll actually break down tissue over time. And break down tendinous tissue or ligamentous tissue, which will make us much more prone to injury. We break down ligament tissue, we break down tendon tissue. That leads a lot. That tends to lead to tears in that tissue or sprains or strains in that tissue. So doing too much cortisone injections can cause tissue to break down and make us more prone to injury. There's been multiple studies that have shown an increase in injuries for NFL players and other professional athletes following cortisone injections. So that's one thing about cortisone. The other, and I think the other reason that people tend to experience injuries after cortisone is because cortisone doesn't fix the problem; it just gets rid of the pain.
Right.
It doesn't fix the muscle imbalance in the area. It doesn't fix the injury that's present. So a lot of times what happens is athletes will get cortisone injections and then they'll feel good and then they'll go out and play just as hard as they were playing. They're like, "Oh, I feel good. I can go out and play." And then they wind up with an injury because they never treated the injury in the first place. They just got rid of the pain. The tissue is still broken down in the same way. And then they go out and they play hard and they wind up with an injury because of it. So in some cases, it can be a helpful tool when administered at the right time, but it should not be overused. And one should also realize their limitations and realize it didn't fix the problem. It just got rid of the pain.
Right. And that was always my goal too. I wanted to fix the problem. I never wanted to take a quick fix and just, think that it's okay.
Yeah, and that's why, even if someone does wind up getting a cortisone injection, they still have to do the work to get the joint balanced out and work with whatever scar tissue or injury happens to be present. Otherwise, they're just going to wind up with a worse injury, more than likely.
Okay. Can you talk about the role that massage plays in healing knee injuries and joint injuries? Because my physical therapist, the one I see here in Connecticut, he always massages it. I imagine that has a
Sure.
benefit as well.
Absolutely. I mean, so like I was saying, a lot of my approach to working with people helps people, stretch the tight muscles around the joints and strengthen the weak muscles around joints. Massage can also be a very helpful tool in helping to reduce tension in the muscles around joints that are tight. The other thing that massage can really help with, so really with what that means is that if massage can help reduce tension in muscles that are tight around the joint, it can help encourage balance around the joint. The other thing about massage is massage can be very good at managing scar tissue. A lot of times, if we have an injury, or just about any time we have an injury around our joint that involves soft tissue, which it oftentimes does, soft tissue being muscles, tendons, and ligaments, anytime we injure the soft tissue around a joint, the body's going to try to heal that with scar tissue. And scar tissue limits motion. Scar tissue makes muscles less flexible, less pliable, and in some cases more weak. And in some cases, scar tissue even causes pain in itself. Massage can be very, very, very good at reducing scar tissue within our muscles and soft tissue. So massage can be very, very helpful in getting the tissues around our joint moving the way they should, and be very, very helpful in reducing pain-causing factors around the joint.
And what are some supplements you recommend for people, just short term while they're trying to recover from pain?
Oh, sure. I mean, the top ones I would probably recommend are, making sure that you're taking some sort of omega-3, which, I try to get as much of it as I can through my diet, via things like, flax seeds, especially like freshly ground flax seeds, hemp seeds, things like that, can be really helpful for improve for increasing the amount of omega-3 in your system, but also taking something like a flaxseed oil or something like that, or another source of omega-3 can be really helpful. Also taking, you can also get like borage oil or evening primrose oil supplements at the health food store. Those can be very helpful as well. A lot of people know of evening primrose oil for like things like sometimes women will take that to help with cramps during their menstrual cycle. And the reason that it helps with cramps is because it helps to lower inflammation. So a lot of people know about evening primrose oil for things like menstrual pain, but it can also help with other pain in the body, like joint pain. So evening primrose oil or borage oil both tend to be really high in ALA, alpha lipoic acid, and GLA, gamma lipoic acid, which are very helpful at reducing inflammation and therefore pain in the body.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I imagine you have a lot of success stories. I'm one of them personally. I think my knee hasn't been swollen weeks now. But can you talk about some of your other success stories?
Sure. There's a few that come to mind immediately. One of my clients that I've worked with for years at this point, I used to work with him in the clinic when I was in Denver, Colorado, and then he's become a client of mine with my online practice as well, and continues to use my stretching programs online. He's been a longtime client of mine, and he's been a great client throughout the years. But it's funny. I always like to tell this story because it's kind of comical to me. The first time I ever came across him and I told him what I do with active isolated stretching and strengthening, I told him about what I do, and because he came to me with low back pain, he came to me with severe low back. He had what's known as a retrolisthesis, where one of his vertebrae in his lower back had actually shifted backward compared to the other.
Oh,
Shifted
wow.
posteriorly compared to the other vertebrae. And what this was doing is this was creating a lot of pressure on his nerve root, on one of the nerve roots in his lumbar spine, and he was having severe low back pain and sciatic pain down his leg all the way to the top of his foot. I remember him just kind of, describing that like it felt like somebody was like hitting him with a sledgehammer on the top of his foot,
Yep.
in addition to the low back pain he was having. But it was kind of comical to me because, when I first came across him, I told him that I think I can help him, and so I told him about what I do, and he said, "Oh, Thomas, that all sounds great, but I don't think I'm flexible enough for that." And I said, well, no, that's actually why we do this work, to help you
Yeah,
get more
exactly.
flexible. So he wound up starting to see me, and he actually, and it was rough because when he first started coming in, he couldn't stand up straight. If he tried to stand up straight, then his entire back would seize up, and he had that pain go down his leg. But over the course of a couple of weeks, we got him back to the point where he was standing up. And he was able to, go to work easily, get in and out of the car easily, which was a major problem for him. And we eventually got him to the point where he was completely out of pain. He
Nice.
was good. He was good for a while. And then he kind of fell off and stopped doing his exercises for a while. And he was still doing good even without his exercises for a while. And then he went and got a tattoo. And in order to get this tattoo, they had him in this bent over position. And I think due to like
Oh,
the
no.
muscle tension with the tattoo, he kind of flared himself back up again. And he walked into my clinic with this kind of like guilty look on his face, saying like, "Oh, I messed it up, Thomas." And I said, "It's okay. You were consistent about your stuff for a while. It won't take long to get you back on track." And I think within a week or two, we had him back out of pain again. And ever since then, he's been pretty diligent about staying on top of his exercises and not letting himself go back the other way.
Yeah, which I plan to as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it's like that's the thing about these stretches and exercises is they only work if you do them. So,
Right, exactly.
and that's one of the things. One of the things I try to instill in all my clients is really a habit of doing this stuff because just because you feel better doesn't mean it's time to stop doing the right movements for your body. Because like, actually, when you feel better, that's when it's good to stay on top of it so that pain or injuries are not coming back in the future.
Right.
Um, Another more recent person I've worked with. I do great work with plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis is one of those things that's just like it's always a slam dunk for me because just the lower extremity is something that I've dealt with a lot. You know, being somebody who hikes and snowboards and everything and distance runs and everything like that.
Yeah, I know a
I've dealt with
number of
a lot of
people have had that. I know how painful it is from the sounds of it.
yeah, so I mean, since I've dealt with it myself, I've been quite good at treating it in other people. I actually have somebody I'm working with currently who came to me with plantar fasciitis. They've been dealing with it for months ever since a pregnancy, but we were able to clear it up very quickly for her. But she's actually stayed on top of her stretching programs and continues to work with me because she doesn't want it to come back again in the future. Um, there's another guy I worked with recently who, much like yourself, was having knee issues. For him, it was actually post surgery. For him, it was post surgery. After surgery, he wasn't getting the amount of flexibility out of his knee that he wanted to.
Yeah,
He had been through traditional rehab, and he had only gotten so much flexion back in his knee, and he really wasn't happy with the amount he got.
right,
And that's really where some of the benefits in what I do come in. The work that I do, active isolated stretching, is very specific. So we're not only able to isolate specific muscles, but also specific parts of those muscles as well. So we can really get into the micro movements around a joint that a lot of traditional approaches that do more general stretching and general range of motion work just don't ever get to.
right.
So with this guy, we were actually able to get his knee replacement knee just as flexible as his knee that hadn't had the
Oh,
knee
great.
replacement. But he was very happy with that. Um, one more thing I'll mention is I used to work with a lot of triathletes and a lot of marathon runners. And there was some people I work with don't come to me in pain. Some people I work with just come to me because they
Okay.
want to improve. Yeah,
Well,
just
yeah, I
want
just
to.
said swelling. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Some people come to me just because they want to improve performance. So there was a marathon runner in Colorado that I was working with, and he had run the New York City Marathon multiple times, and he started coming to me just because he wanted to get better at his running, and he felt that doing the right work with his muscles and getting his muscles optimized and as strong as they should be and as flexible as they should be would help. And so we started working together for a few months, and then that year he shaved 7 minutes off of his New York City
Oh,
Marathon time,
nice. Nice.
which is huge.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Now, I know the benefits of stretching, but if somebody stretches the wrong way, can they do even more damage?
In some cases, yes. There's a lot of people. A lot of people just don't know what they don't know. So in certain cases, there's certain ways that I just don't recommend people stretch. Some of the most common stretches that people do out there just don't really address muscles in the way they should. And I think that's because, most people aren't learning how to stretch from people who are experts in flexibility and mobility. Most people are learning how to stretch from like their strength conditioning coach or their running coach or their soccer coach or football coach or however it happens to be. And these people might know a lot about they might know a lot about running, or they might know a lot about football, or they might know a lot about strength training. But flexibility is not their specialty, and oftentimes they're working with outdated information on flexibility. One of the two most common mistakes I see people making in stretching are, one, holding their stretches too long. I teach people to move into a stretch and hold it for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 2 seconds, then go all the way back to a neutral position, and then move into the stretch again and do 8 to 10 repetitions. The reason I teach people that is because we found that after about 2 seconds of holding a muscle at its end range, that muscles will oftentimes try to start fighting back and try to start shortening. At which point, if the muscle is trying to shorten, you're not effectively stretching the muscle so much, but you're more or less just kind of tugging on the tendons on either end, which eventually can weaken those tendons and make them more prone to injury.
Wow.
The other thing that happens when we hold stretches for too long is, when we move a muscle to its end range, we're holding that muscle in such a taut position that we're not really allowing adequate blood flow into the muscle while you're holding that stretch. And you're not really allowing waste to be removed from the muscle for that entire duration of the stretch. So when people move into a stretch and hold a stretch for say 10, 20, 30 seconds, even a minute, like people do in static stretching, you can actually be, decreasing blood flow into the muscle, which, that blood flow is necessary for healing nutrients to come into the muscle and also to remove waste from the muscle adequately either. So for that entire 10, 20, 30 seconds, however long you're holding that stretch, you're really just kind of starving the muscle of nutrients and letting waste to build up in the muscle. So that's why I teach people to move into the stretch, hold it for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, then return all the way to neutral. So that way the muscle can shorten, soak up blood, get rid of waste, and then we stretch again from there.
Right. So I just thought of planks when you were talking about holding it. Is that the same kind of thing? Would
Well, I mean, a plank is not necessarily a stretch, and at no point a plank is more of an isometric strength exercise. So at no point during a plank is your are any muscles being moved to their end range. So you're not really starving the muscle so much, and you're also not risking having the muscle fight back. So I mean, a plank is an isometric movement. So, although planks can be a great exercise, I think it's also important to do exercises for those same muscles that move those muscles throughout their entire range of motion. A
sure.
plank is only going to exercise the part of the muscle that has to be engaged to maintain that position.
Yeah,
Whereas if we do exercises that move throughout the entire range of motion in that muscle, then we actually strengthen the entire muscle as well.
that makes sense. Is there one certain stretch that you recommend everybody do, whether they're in pain or not? Just something that could be beneficial to everybody? Is there a certain one they should focus on?
I tell everybody that there's not really anybody out there who wouldn't benefit from stretching their pectoral muscles on a regular basis. As human beings, pretty much everything we do involves having our arms out in front of us. So if you think computers, driving, cell phones, even eating, we have our arms out in front of us. As human beings, we don't really do a lot of stuff with our arms back here. It's just not how we work. But because of that, these muscles in the front of our shoulders, our pectoral muscles, our anterior deltoids, even our biceps, wind up getting tight. And even if it doesn't visually change our posture and pull our shoulders forward, it winds up making everything here and here have to work extra hard. So there's really almost nobody out there who wouldn't benefit from stretching their pectoral muscles on a more regular basis.
Right. How would somebody reach out to you? I know I did through Facebook. Do you have a web page as well?
I do. So my website is accuracyaistherapy.com, and you can book a free consult from the workshops page on my website. So it's accuracyaistherapy.com, and you can book a free 30-minute consultation right with me from that site there. Also, people can also give me a call as well. My phone number is 720-255-1071.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, I do think I'm one of your success stories as well, because honestly, I was dealing with this swelling for chronic for 4 years. I mean, go away and then come back. It was really kind of frustrating. And I've been doing the stair stepper more. I'm starting to use the treadmill more. So it's just been an awesome experience.
That's fantastic. Swelling around the knee tends to come from the same thing. That's a sign of inflammation.
Yeah.
So, if the tissue around our knee, if the tissue around our knee is tight, then it doesn't allow for the proper amount of fluid uptake. It doesn't allow that fluid to move out of there the way it should. But also at the same time, if that tissue is tight in some areas and weak in other areas, again, that's allowing those surfaces of the joint to meet in an uneven way, which creates more pressure and therefore
Yeah.
more inflammation. So, a lot of what we focused on with you was loosening up the muscles and that needed to be loosened, but also strengthening the muscles that needed to be strengthened. That's one of the other benefits to the 2-second holds involved in active isolated stretching. We move into the stretch, we hold for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, we go all the way back to neutral, we do multiple repetitions. And that actually creates kind of a pumping action around the joint, which is very, very helpful for swelling. I remember I used to have people come into the clinic in Colorado with ankle sprains, and they would have an ankle the size of a grapefruit, and within 30 minutes we could reduce that swelling significantly
Wow.
just by the pumping action of the joint involved in AIS. So it can be very helpful with things like swelling.
Yeah, definitely. All right. That's all the questions I have. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk with my audience, because I know a lot of people are suffering with joint problems. And
Yeah, well, I'm happy to help. That's if you want, one of the things you can do is you can share my email address. My email is
Sure.
just Thomas at accuracyAIstherapy.com. And if anybody wants to send me an email, I'm happy to send them a copy of my free copy of my ebook, Strong and Limber, which is all about the importance of flexibility and mobility.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.